Hello, I'm Finn Broach, and today I'm going to be talking about San Junipero as a piece of queer sci-fi, especially as a piece of overt queer sci-fi. And it's an episode of Black Mirror, which is a series of contained stories, where each individual episode is its own complete unique story. San Junipero falls in season 3, episode 4, and it focuses on these two women, showed up here on the screen, Kelly and Yorkie, and their relationship together, as well as exploring some of the world that they're in, although it falls into more of the soft science fiction, with the more interpersonal relationship being the bigger, overall storytelling device that's used. And the science and the scientific future or technology that's used in the story is less of the focus, and the science itself behind it isn't explained at all. It's kind of just a magical science thing that's there. So the story is completely just focused on the two. There aren't a lot of additional characters outside of them besides a few support characters, and it truly is about the development of their relationship together. And it follows the trope of the shy, anxious girl Yorkie and the outgoing, almost even punk, super almost even flamboyant character Kelly, and their relationship together. Although in the normal cis-het trope, it would follow more of the story of them meeting and then a love interest coming in who Yorkie would fall for. But this subverts that by being a queer story where they fall for each other and their struggles and their beginning of their relationship and their development into a fully fledged relationship. The story itself has a really interesting relationship with time that is developed in a really slow moving, not deeply explained way. So it isn't until a lot later on into the story that you really get a sense that something is off about it, because originally it's set in this 70s style disco almost kind of a scene where the two characters meet each other and they really get to know each other, and you start to see the personalities behind them, with Yorkie being a lot shyer and being a lot less willing to go along with whatever crazy antics Kelly comes up with, and Kelly being well socialized, very clearly interacting with everyone and very sociable and very excited to meet and talk with everyone. So I want to go ahead and show you a scene at the start of the film, of the episode, that really focuses in on their relationship and shows just how early on this overt queerness comes into the story, because it's pretty immediate and it's contained throughout it is this idea of queerness that's explored super well. So here's this scene.
What would you like to do that you've never done?
Oh, so many things.
San Junipero is a party town. All up for grabs. Midnight's 2 hours away.
Oh, that's not long.
Why waste time sitting here?
So I wanted to specifically highlight this scene because it shows kind of Kelly's outgoingness and her willingness to immediately jump into this queer relationship, while it also shows some of Yorkie's more hesitancies, and it also highlights the fact that even just 10 minutes into the episode, we're already getting this overt, direct queer story, which is incredible. And it also has some of these ideas of time that are brought into this idea of why would you waste time? Why there's so much left that Yorkie wants to experience, and this idea of queerness, coming into your queerness later on in your life and feeling you've missed out on a lot of this youth and this the youthful falling in love and running down the beach together kind of a thing. You missed out on that in high school or in your younger years, when the more cis-het normative kind of structures and societies would have you think that you have to experience those things during that time. This kind of delves into that, with Yorkie not having experienced any of that and being there's so much left I want to experience, even though it's clear that she's no longer in her extreme youth. Yeah, so I want to go ahead and move us along to a little bit later on in the episode with another piece that I wanted to show you. This is where we really start to see the aspect of, no, sorry, that was too far, where we really start to see the queerness like come into itself as we see Yorkie and Kelly talking after having like an intimate moment together.
Yeah, I'll say.
When did you know that you liked women?
I like men too. Equal rights.
Okay. But when did you know? Do you always know?
I was married to a guy. A long time I was married. I always knew. I mean, I'd be attracted to other girls. Co-workers, friends, some waitress who'd serve me. There were crushes. God, were there crushes. Never acted on any of it. Never did anything.
It's them talking about their relationships and their intimacies together, and not just about their like queerness as something to be ashamed of or to be avoiding. And this episode really progresses as a 70s queer love story with only like vague hints as like a non-linear time science fiction element to it. And as you can see, we're almost halfway through the episode already, and there aren't any really hints to there being something larger going on besides vague allusions to some sort of weird time kind of a thing. And it isn't until a lot later on that we get the idea that this is San Junipero itself is a place for people who are at the end of their lives to go and re-experience their youth and have more like bodily autonomy when they might not be able to in the real world. And it's kind of like an iCloud, kind of like a cloud kind of a thing where like you upload your consciousness to it and you can go through the different eras, especially the different eras of your childhood. And we see that in the way that Yorkie and Kelly like interact with each other in the real world. Yorkie is completely paralyzed and can't move or talk and is a much older woman, and Kelly has some sort of an illness that's like severely impacted her life and she's at the end of her life. And the San Junipero, where they're young and in love, is their almost escape from the like harshness of the world and their like experiences inside of it. And they talk pretty explicitly about Yorkie's queerness and her experiences just a little bit later on that I want to highlight as being like a real grounded moment for the storytelling, especially for a lot of people that are in the current generation can relate a lot to. And I think it really brings this into like a more true, like modern almost sense. So I'm going to highlight this real quick.
Night, she's 21, comes out to her folks. They're a little uptight about it, you might say. Tell her they don't want a gay daughter, it's not natural, and so forth. They fight, she gets in her car, runs it off the road, boom.
When she was 21?
More than 40 years back. It's been her whole lifetime, basically. So the whole San Junipero system has been a big deal for her, I mean, the biggest deal. Of course, now, until she passes over, goes permanent, she's on the 5-hour weekly limit.
So this is again talking about this idea that they're like this queerness is still something that's not completely accepted, and it's something that you have to like fight for acceptance in yourself, which is a real like a nod to the current present world and like the real world as well that we are living in currently, that I think is really important because it ties the story into like this more modern, not modern, like this is future modern, but like present kind of a sense, and making it feel more grounded and real, which I think is really important. And San Junipero itself talks a lot about like time and has a super non-linear time. In San Junipero, you can be within whatever era or decade that you like, with everything being like very 70s, very 80s, very early 2000s kind of a feeling. And this idea of like a non-linear time is something that I think is in a sense almost inherently queer, because of the way that queer people experience like the normative like cycle of time differently than like the cis-het like society experiences it. We experience time in a way that's less like linear, set out with like going through your decades, like having high school romances and then going to college and then getting married and having kids. And it's all very structured and set out in a way that a lot of queer people don't resonate with, and especially a lot of trans people don't experience their like ages and their like eras in the same way that cisgender people might. And I think having that kind of queerness in the way that time is experienced is really important and really impactful, because it shows a lot of like depth to the way in which queer time is like queer identities experience time in just this completely not like direct like parallel to how straight cis people might as well. And I don't remember all of the theory that I've read on queer time, but I think it's something that's really impactful and something that helped me to understand my relationship with myself and my experiences growing up a lot better, especially as a queer trans person. It's really helped me to solidify this idea that like just because I didn't experience youth in the same way that a lot of cis-het people did, that doesn't mean that my experiences of my youth aren't invalid, or that like I have to be fully done experiencing the things that a lot of people experienced in their like super young youth because it was laid out perfectly for them by the structure that society has created. And I think having that like non-linear time as it does in this episode is a great homage and nod to like that idea of queer time that's becoming more and more talked about and more prevalent in queer spaces. So yeah, that was San Junipero. It's very sweet. It has kind of a rough moment towards the end where you're like, oh no, are they like not going to get together? But then, as a spoiler, it is a happy ending. You see them in love and just being kind to each other and being accepting, and just like there's a real moment of just like kinship and bondship that I think is really important, and showing them like overcoming the things that they're scared of, which is really sweet and really important in queer stories, because so often we don't get that narrative of acceptance and happiness. So yeah, San Junipero is an amazing like hour-long piece of media that I highly recommend. And Black Mirror itself too has a lot of really interesting stories that are heavily sci-fi, but this is the only overtly queer one that I can remember, and I can't remember a whole lot of like non-overt queerness in the other episodes, so that's why I talked about this one specifically. Yeah, it's a really amazing story, and I think that the idea of queer time is something that's incredibly fascinating to me, and I'd love to hear any more things that people have to say on queer time, because I think it's something that something that has been extremely impactful in my life and my journey in learning about queer theory, and I'd love to hear how you guys relate to that as well. So, yep, thank you. That was my presentation, and have a good night or a good day or whenever you're watching this.